everyone. It's the Progressive Podcast. Dylan, you want to do the introduction? Let me throw it to you.
Sure, Beleh. I'll do the intro. Welcome to the Progressive Podcast. My name is Beleh, or my name is not Beleh. My name is Dylan. I'm joined by Beleh, and we are joined by Sunjay, the president of the College Democrats, and we are excited to talk about how we can improve as Democrats and be better in the upcoming midterms. But do you want to introduce yourself, where you're from, your horrible basketball team, if you want to talk about it?
Oh, yeah, of course. So my name is Sunjay. As Dylan mentioned, I'm the current president of the College Democrats of America. We're pretty much arguably the largest grassroots democratic leaning organization in the country. We have approximately 500 chapters across the nation. I'm from Fremont, California, but I go to school in UC San Diego. And as Dylan said, I'm a fan of the greatest basketball team of all time, the Golden State Warriors.
The question is,
yeah.
do you have Luka Doncic on your team though?
Okay. Well,
you have Jimmy Butler. Just give it like a year and a half, and he'll throw a fit and go sign with another team at some point.
I don't know. I think him and Draymond, they're gonna bond.
Okay.
I believe it.
Okay. Yeah, I could see it. They're both fiery personalities. But hey, the Nets almost got you guys. I have to believe that if the Nets almost got you a first round playoff series, you're gone. You're wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had a good enough history this past decade, so I feel like everything else is just icing on the cake.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not
historical argument. I hear it.
You know what? That's the real poli-sci. Are you poli-sci major? What's your major?
Yeah, I'm a poli-sci major.
That's the poli-sci major in him. It's like, well, we did this in the past, and give us a break. It's kind of funny, but no, Sunjay, thank you for joining us. I know that we're excited to have you, and Dylan and I, like I said earlier, we actually met at Brew and Democrats here at UCLA. Awesome. You're the president of, I'm guessing, also UCSD. What do you guys call yourself? The Triton? What do you guys again?
Yeah, we're Tritons. Yeah.
Yeah, the Triton Democrats. Is that what you guys call yourselves, or?
Yes. Which is UCSD Dems. We actually
UCSD Dems. Yeah, and so I kind of want to start out with that and how you got involved in politics. What led you to become politically active, and how did you get to the point where you're the president of, as you said, the largest grassroots democratic organization in the country?
So the origin story is kind of funny. I'm a little embarrassed, I'll be honest. So my mom was really interested in like the 2020 elections, and she was following the first ever Hindu to ever run for president. And I don't know if you guys know this, that person was then Democrat Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh yeah.
So my mom took me to a Tulsi Gabbard rally. And I wasn't a huge fan of her specifically, but I was just interested in I was like, oh, this is really cool. I was like 16 then, and I kind of fell into a rabbit hole. Kind of just diving in and seeing, kind of being so interested, wow, look at this massive field of different candidates. And at that time, I kind of gravitated towards Andrew Yang, largely because he showed me that you could just be a regular dude with good ideas and get involved in politics, and I think that kind of made me realize, hey, why not I try? And then I came to UC San Diego looking for ways to get involved. And what I found is, like you guys did, my local College Democrats Club. And there I kind of worked internally, kind of rebuilt our club. We started off with 3 members when I came in. Now we're at 25 active. It's been 2 years, so it's been pretty good. I started off the director of comms there, then the vice president. And I later joined the statewide level. I was recruited to run for San Diego regional director. And then as a whim, I just DM'd the current VP of College Democrats of America a year later on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, can I get in? And he plugged me in, and then incrementally rose up the ranks there. Became vice president through an appointment after we impeached our vice president, something I can get into later if you're interested. And then kind of built up, worked alongside our states, kind of do the best that we could to advocate for Vice President Harris and Democrats across the ballot. And while things didn't go our way, I was able to build a lot of strong relationships with a lot of the state leaders, and that kind of allowed me to become the president with very little opposition.
Yeah. I think where I want to start is you mentioned briefly that you started with 3 members at your UCSD Democratic Club. How did you find the motivation to get people politically involved, especially on a college campus where most students are going to be Democratic and in a state where everyone's left-leaning? How do you get people motivated to actually go into their communities and start that process of reaching out to voters and having those conversations on college campuses that we want to be having?
Of course, well, there's 2 major ways. I think the first thing is that a lot of students, especially college students of our age, are looking to build up their careers in politics. And to me, the number one way that I would say, if you want to get a job in politics post-grad, you join your College Democrats chapter. because by joining there, you're put into like an internal group that is incredibly well connected within your county parties and the local officials around there. Even though we had 3 members, all elected officials in San Diego, from Todd Gloria to members of the city council, knew who college Democrats were. So
Yeah.
it's an easy sell to be like, hey, you might not think that it's important to get involved, but if you want to build your career, this is like the place to start. That's one. I think the second part is just making it clear that local elections matter too. And even though San Diego is largely, I mean, we have all blue city council right now, and our board of supervisors is like a 3-2 blue majority. Despite
I
that,
interned for the Republican on there back when I was 15 and a half.
oh, awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
no, that's. I'm glad that I don't have to deal
Little
with that.
twist.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
what's
the thing. Yeah, so kind of to Blaze's point, it can always shift rightward, and we still are vaguely a swing district, and that's kind of why we just stay involved.
Yeah, I think
well,
you nailed it. And being from San Diego, I understand the local politics of San Diego is a little complicated. We used to actually be pretty red. I think Bush won
Yep.
San Diego, if I'm not mistaken. It was Obama who flipped it. Ever since then, it's been pretty blue, but it depends where you're at. I'm from East County, where it's a lot more mixed. You have a lot of Republicans out in Lakeside, in Alpine, and growing up, my state senator, till this day, not to this day actually, it just changed 2 years ago. My state senator was a Republican, so I wanted to get involved in politics, and I interned for my state senator, and we actually focused on constituent services, and that's when I started to love public service. So I think what you bring up is a good point. Like, get involved locally, and look, the president of College Democrats is saying this, so I think your shit. So people kind of I know some people that can think that local elections don't matter. Can you talk a little bit about that and how local elections can impact people's everyday lives?
Well, yeah, of course. I think there's kind of this general auspice that we feel that, oh, the the guy at the top is the one who makes the big decisions. But in reality, our governing system is inherently structured as a federalist system, and because of that, we have statewide and local governments that are actively defending against the assault of the Trump administration. And kind of by building the bench locally in city councils and mayor offices and state senators, we're able to, even though it might seem like what we're doing right now, we'll have people on the ground locally who are actively defending our rights as Trump attempts to take them from us.
right. Yeah. And I feel like that ground game, especially as young people who have the energy to just go and canvas for 8 hours on a weekend or anything like that is super important. What are the main strategies that you are utilizing when you are helping with local races? Is it social media? Is it the ground game? Is it going dorm to dorm, trying to get people to sign up to register to vote? What does your strategy look like?
I think it varies per campus. I think in a campus like UC San Diego, for example, dorm storming isn't as effective just because we're not the most civically inclined campus. But I think in kind of the more Midwestern schools like MSU, that's kind of been a common tactic that we've used there. But I think what makes College Democrats one of the strongest organizations is our grassroots network. Like right now, we're busting our chapters in Minnesota and Illinois up to Wisconsin to help out the Supreme Court race there. So kind of, as you mentioned before, us young people, we can move bodies. So I think that's number one. I think number two, a lot of it is social media. I'm sure you follow, or you may follow our page, both on Twitter and on Instagram. We have 14K followers on Instagram, 43K on Twitter, and we kind of are constantly engaging in new media there. And also, lastly, something that I'm personally passionate about is, going on podcasts like this. My thing is always like I'll talk to anyone, from the New York Times to someone in high school, because I think it's important that we engage with all audiences where they're at. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we made last election cycle.
Totally echo that. I think that as Democrats, we need to be able to reflect and realize that we've become, in some ways, a party of restrictions when it comes to allowing people into the party and who we're going to speak to. And I think like an example of that is, Joe Rogan and the Harris campaign. And I know that I know that the Harris campaign tried to go on, but a lot of strings attached. And I think that what I tell Democrats all the time and the people that we've had a couple of Congress people now on the podcast is that, look, you're not going on these podcasts to necessarily become friends with the hosts. You're not going to go get like coffee with them afterwards. You're going to these podcasts because their audiences matter, right? And their audience, for the most part, for example, just take Joe Rogan, for example, they're hearing a lot of right wing stuff on their audience. Their audience is hearing a lot of right wing stuff. So when they go and vote for Trump, can we really blame them if us as Democrats and people on the left aren't willing to go speak in places where we may not be welcomed at first, but we're going there to speak to voters, to people. So I think we kind of need to get out. I always say this: we need to get out of our fucking bubble, dude. Like,
Yeah.
we are this in some ways. I am too. I'm from San Diego, so like we are this coastal elite. That doesn't mean we aren't struggling. I hate when people are like, "Oh, well, you're from the coast, and you aren't struggling." We are this coastal elite. So going and speaking to regular people and going on platforms like Theo Vaughn, just to name drop a couple things that aren't inherently political, but when politics is brought up there, it's usually only one side that's going and speaking to those people.
Yeah, and I just like echoing Sanjay's point, it's also not always just like the super high echelon podcasts that you can go on. It's also the local ones. Part of the reason why Belay got me on this podcast, besides me just being the coolest guy ever, is I'm the president of my fraternity at UCLA, which is very much more like a young white man skewed to the right, and I'm this vegan, sober, left-leaning frat president, and so you
Sober,
do
okay.
well for
Last weekend you
trying to be more sober, but it's important to also get those local places where like a lot of my friends in my fraternity are not left-leaning. They will proudly rep a Trump flag in their room and while they're pounding a Coors Light. It's like it's not always those places that you are like, it's not always the highest echelon places that you need to go to, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think I mean two things just to follow up. One, I completely agree that you don't have to go to the upper echelon. And kind of what College Democrats aims to do is we've seen Charlie Kirk kind of he's coming to my campus soon, and he understands that college.
Oh, he's been here all the time.
And the thing is, people are looking for what's alternative. And all you need to do is work with these electeds to come down and work with our chapters, and we can get them on campus like this. We understand, how to work around the system and get speaking time and figure out kind of the niche internal bureaucracy of every school. So I mean that's the first thing. I think the second thing you mentioned is it is deeply important that we embrace this new media, and it's also deeply important that we have conversations with people we don't completely agree with. One of the people that I talked to recently was Adam French. He ran for DNC vice chair. He nearly defeated Boebert in 2022.
Yeah.
Like, it was a 500 vote differential. I mean, I asked him, I was like, Adam, I'm a suburb boy from California. What does rural outreach look like? And kind of one of the quotes that he told me that stuck with me is Democrats bring the cookbook and Republicans bring the brownies. And I think we need to be more open about bringing the brownies instead of always being the party of process. Instead of being like, oh, Donald Trump is going to implement Schedule F, and that's going to get to bureaucracy, and that's going to make it inherently partisan. No, we have to keep, we should make it simple. Where, for example, when Harris has her house rebate policies, we want to make homes cheaper for first-time home buyers.
Yes.
Things like that.
And I think like part of the housing policy was an example of like them being, like, oh, we're gonna have this down payment assistance, and people, like, a lot of people understood what that was. That was circulating around. I think when it comes to policy too, as Democrats, we get too wonky, right? And like, for example, no hate to like the Democrats page. I actually have a friend who works there, and she's doing an amazing job. But one of their posts, it was like all 200 and whatever 17 Republicans voted to undermine veterans care, and I literally commented, can you just say cut? Like, can you just say oh, but it's not technically 100% truthful? And I'm like, no, if you're voting to undermine something, you're technically voting to cut it. If one person loses care, you are cutting it. And so it's that type of plain spoken language, and we kind of just delve too much into the academic language, and then we turn and it does at some level turn people away from us. You don't know the amount of people I know that have told me, hey, like, I like when the Democrats want to give more people health care. I like the Democrats want to do X, Y, and Z, but they just talk down at me. They don't like, and that's a big thing with us. We talk down at people. And I like what you're saying about going to different places and spheres. So how can we as Democrats kind of realize that, hey, people may have different beliefs in us, but if they agree with us on more than 50% of things, we should welcome them in.
Well, I think it comes down to a fundamental change in our mentality. Instead of kind of viewing, like, as you kind of mentioned, if you don't agree with us on everything, you're not welcome. We should look at the people who are leaving and defecting from our party isn't an indictment on them. It's an indictment of us to not create a welcoming enough party. And that's kind of the number one thing that I champion. I have good friends who, are teetering on the right and did vote Trump, and I don't blame them for it. I think that it is up to me and my friends at College Democrats of America, as well as insiders within the DNC and our, Democrats across the country, to make that case. That's the thing one. And I think the second thing is is to focus more on what broadly unites us. And I think what normally does is the fact that the majority of us Americans are going through an economic crisis. For us, for example, as young people, home prices are up like 800% from the past since like the 1980s, and wages have only been up 300%. So it's like it's not keeping pace. It's so much harder for us to kind of live the American dream that our parents did. And I think Democrats should be focused on, Republicans like Trump are going to claim that they can lower prices. They're going to claim that they stand for you, but we actually do. We've done the work when it comes to making houses more affordable. We've done the work to increase minimum wage and focus on that type of message.
Yeah, real quick, Dylan. I just want to say one thing. Sunjay, I'm actually working on an ad. Like I was like, you know what? I saw a clip of Trump. I remember this clip of him when he was outside of, I think it was in his golf course in New Jersey, and he had all these products out when he was running for president. He had like price tags on them, and he says in the speech, "I will lower costs day one." So I'm like actually currently working on an ad. If you want to help me with it or work on it with me, and it basically like it's him saying, "I will bring down costs day one," and then it goes to immediately like, "These how much our eggs cost this much today. Because of tariffs, cars are going to cost this much today." Like the fact that I'm not seeing that out there is insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I do feel like messaging like inside the party and outside the party is super important. What do you feel like, especially since there is the narrative that college campuses are very left leaning and have kind of this groupthink mentality? How have you found it best to engage with college Republicans? I don't know if they have an equivalent sort of organization or anything like that, but maybe just on individual campuses. How do you, especially in campuses where it might be more moderate or right leaning, how do you approach those people in having productive conversations that might help us get towards a closer middle?
And of course, well, I think the first thing is knowing that um, you need to go in there with an open mind. You don't have to agree with anything they say, but at least understand why they think that way. Try to learn more about their background. Ask more questions. Why do you think this way? Kind of walking in with intellectual curiosity. And I know there's this common dichotomy of like, oh, there's no middle ground between fascism and democracy, and I understand that. I have went to my college Republicans meeting, and I had listened to some very questionable takes, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's something. Like, but I think at the end of the day, people just want to be heard, and you might not be able to solve the issue. You might not be able to convince them to come to your side, but at the very least, if you could humanize your side of the party and their end, we'll be able to kind of dial back this growing polarization that we've seen across our country.
Yeah, and I think especially since we are college students who are able to grapple with these ideas, the polarization should end with our generation. It shouldn't continue where um, our college education rates are going up. The amount of people who have degrees is going up. The quality of our education is improving as we learn more and grow inside the society. Like polarization should be an issue of the past. That was actually something I worked on briefly last quarter when we were registering people to vote. Like it was very much told to me, you're not allowed to talk about what party you want to vote for. You're not allowed to encourage people to vote in a certain way. Not only because it's illegal, but also because you want to be nonpartisan in these conversations and realize that democracy is for everyone, even if one side might be trying to steal a little bit more January 6th type um, activities. They might be doing that more, but it's still important for people to have that process. How do you think? Um, how do you think Democrats should go forward in um, kind of this like doomer mentality? Me and Belay have been talking about this, especially with our one of our mutual friends. How do you think Democrats should go forward in recognizing that we are in the opposition right now, and we are young people? Sometimes we feel powerless in what we can do. What's the best approach to not giving up hope in a lot of these situations?
Well, I think the first two things comes down to, first of all, recognize that he has a very slim mandate. Like this was by no means like an FDR sweeping election. He had narrow victories in every single swing state. His majority in the House of Representatives is like the smallest we've seen in the past century. So that's thing one. Like this was not a dominant victory. It's very much like a 50-50 split. Um, And I think the second thing really rests in that historically, like it times like this kind of truly test our strength as a movement. And I think like kind of the ideal of pressure breeds diamonds or creates diamonds. We're under pressure right now, and it's up to us to realize that do we to realize are we truly willing to fight for the ideals that we believe in, and that means continuing on even when it's uncomfortable and even when the odds are stacked against us. Because at the end of the day, the arc of history bends towards justice, but it isn't always consistent, and it's up to us to continue pushing, to continue contesting the ballot box, and encouraging our peers to vote, and doing the essential groundwork and learning from the mistakes that we've made to ensure that this kind of current Trump administration is a failed experiment in history rather than the norm of the 21st century.
What you mentioned the mistakes that we made. What do you think are the biggest takeaways from 2024? What, because my personal feeling, part of the reason why we started this podcast was because Kamala wouldn't engage with certain voters. There were reports about her staff not wanting her to go on Joe Rogan because he was too conservative. What mistakes should we be taking as a party away from 2024? And the very narrow loss seems like minimizing a couple of mistakes might have switched the way that the election went.
Of course, I think there's a couple things. I think one is instead of trying to outcompete the Republicans and kind of moving rightward, we should be more focused on mobilizing our base. One of the major reasons that we suffered our loss was a lot of people who turned out for Biden in 2020 didn't turn out again. And honestly, it's unsurprising when you're having, Liz Cheney be your major kind of campaign surrogate. You're not bringing up Bernie Sanders, you're not bringing up Greg Cesar and other members of the Progressive Caucus. You're favoring Liz Cheney over that. And I think I don't know about you guys, but I've never met a proud Liz Cheney voter in my life. And I've spoken to a lot of people. So I think that's the first thing, just kind of being more comfortable that we are a Big Ten party, and someone like Kamala Harris who's more moderate can be at the top of our ticket, but also be willing to uplift the more progressive wings in Bernie Sanders and the rest of the Progressive Caucus. And the second thing is embracing new media. You guys put it well that a lot of times us Democrats are afraid to have unscripted conversations. I think Ben Wilker, who was the runner-up in the DNC chair race, kind of put it very well on The Daily Show when he said, us Democrats, when we're taking media features, we're kind of adhering to very strict talking points, kind of trying to avoid these certain landmines. But while we're avoiding those landmines, we actually forget to actually represent what we believe in and represent anything, for lack of a better term. And I think being more comfortable with going on these networks and knowing that, hey, we might screw up here and there, but that's okay. I hate JD Vance, but to his credit, when he was out there on the campaign trail, he screwed up the first few times, but he kept on trying and trying and trying. And by the end of it, he was relatively favorable. And on the flip side, Tim Walz came in as the most popular guy out of the four with Trump, Harris, and Vance. But when we brought him on, we barely put him out on the media. We kind of sheltered him to the, and I honestly don't know who made that decision or why. But I think that was just did not make a lot of sense. So I think the last thing is we just need to start kind of embracing young people in positions of power. Because as we saw, this is one of the first elections where we loosened our hold on the youth vote, and 56% of young men voted for Trump. And I will say there's a lot of progress in this regard. We just had our DNC vice chair elections, and the two youngest people in the race were elected of the three. You had 24-year-old David Hogg and 34-year-old Malcolm Kenyatta. And I think both of these individuals, who I know personally, aren't just young people on paper. They actually they walk the talk and represent the best interests of young people rather than kind of generic power climbers who are doing whatever they can to gain a new role to put on their resume.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I kind of want to shift gears here, and there's nothing happening in politics today, man. There's so much we can talk about, and I kind of want to talk. What was your reaction to the joint address to Congress? Technically, actually, not a State of the Union.
Yep.
Yeah, I love doing that. But what was your reaction to the joint address? And we did a reaction video, and I can kind of tell you what I thought, but I want to hear your thoughts about it.
The man, he has no shame. He will sit up there and say whatever sounds vaguely politically expedient. He had that one line about the transgender mice, and I get it. Off first glance, you're like, oh, why are they making transgender mice? That's kind of strange. But when you dig into it, it's because they're trying to figure out ways for trans people post-surgery to grapple with certain health issues, because there just isn't a lot of investment in those specific fields. And I think this constant assault on these minority groups that are already underrepresented, that are already oppressed, and using them as political talking points, to me is incredibly disgusting. He didn't even just do it there. He also brought up transports. And to me, I see this largely as a non-issue. If it were up to me, I would leave it up to the leagues and let them do it on a case-by-case basis. They know far more than these
Okay.
elected officials would. And when you look at within the leagues, there's barely a presence. There's like 10 trans athletes in the NCAA, for example, and they have like 500K athletes as a whole. So I think I mean that's just one issue. But I think there's this common trend of just willing to punch down on people's livelihoods for and lie about them for political talking points.
Real quick, while I agree with you on all of that, I do think that like Newsom recently came out and said it's a fairness issue, and I saw a lot of people on the left attacking him. The problem we have here is that it is an issue that a lot of Americans do care about. Like it or not, it is a fact that like it is an issue that people talk about. And when there was a recent New York Times poll that showed that even a majority of Democrats, for example, thought that that trans women shouldn't be allowed in like women leagues or women's sports. And so that's something that I think that while I agree that it's like a non-issue and we should be talking about economic issues, at the same time, we have to have a cohesive answer on it. And there's going to be some people in the party that may disagree, right? And I think, like it or not, you can agree with Newsom's position, not agree with Newsom's position, but I think that him coming out there and stating what he believes in, that's what he believes in, right? And we don't have to vehemently attack him for that. I think that's also, that's the problem I see with the left, is like, we just start attacking people when you disagree with us on X issue, whatever issue it is. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I think that's a reasonable assessment. And personally, I don't really think that a lot of Americans are too in tune to this issue. I think it's more of
Yeah.
just something that's been overly politicized. And I think the right has kind of successfully co-opted it as, a effective culture war message.
Yes.
But I'm personally of the belief that if we push for more economic specific messaging and actually make it clear that we stand with you and we have a record of standing with everyday Americans, that's going to resonate far more. Because Trump didn't win, because of these niche culture war issues. Trump won because people believed he would lower prices. So, but to your point, I do agree that there needs to be more tolerance for diverse viewpoints within our party, because at the end of the day, we are a big tent, and unlike the right, who could kind of say whatever, we actually have some moral clarity. But I think with that moral clarity should also come respect for those who may slip up here and there, and a willingness to not push back against everything that we may slightly disagree with.
Yeah, and the identity of the Democrats as a big tent party is something that is both accepted and rejected at the same time, and I think it's confusing to voters. Like you said, having Liz Cheney as one of your primary campaign surrogates while also being too scared to go on Joe Rogan's podcast just doesn't make sense logically. It's not logically consistent. You either need to bite the bullet of maybe upsetting some of your base who will vote for you inevitably. I don't think you will find a very like left-leaning person who would just turn coat and vote for Trump. You need to find a way to also not betray them while also just being consistent on your message and your policies. One thought that has been rattling around in my mind is that the policy focus of Democrats has been more big picture, big projects like Medicare for all, like both of Biden's relatively successful legislative accomplishments, Build Back Better and the American Rescue Plan, both very big pieces of legislation. Where do you think Democrats can make more small wins? It's always a question of culture war. It's always a question of how can we fix the entire housing issue or the entire homeless issue. As California residents, we're very familiar with this. What are the smaller things that Democrats can win on?
Well, I think one of the smaller things that we've lost on, as you kind of brought up, is largely the culture war. And I think that's because we aren't in the spaces making our case. And I think the way that we should frame it is we unapologetically stand with marginalized communities. I think there's kind of this fear to kind of play the political game where, like trans rights right now is in politics media. I think what we should do is be like, no, what Trump is doing is disgusting. He's lying about a community, and we're going to push back. And I think having this like constant rhetoric of standing with people who are not who are in some instances aren't able to stand up for themselves is one way that we can kind of build upon, kind of moving the culture war and making that one of our wins.
Yeah. Do you feel like the culture war is a smaller issue that not to minimize like a lot of the discussions around that, but do you feel like the culture war is a smaller thing than what Democrats should be focused on?
I definitely think so. I think that our main focus should be kind of the core economic message, because we're grappling with a reality where wealth is concentrated in a way that's unprecedented.
Right.
Globally, you have like 1% of people owning more than 95% of the global community, and I know it's similar within our nation as well. And I think that's the message that resonates
Yeah.
closer with everyday
Eh,
Americans. And I think part of the reason why Elon Musk, for example, is such a terrible approval rating is
Yes.
because people don't like the richest man in the world getting vital agencies that are meant to oversee his companies.
Yes, and I want to take this back to the policy. I think we spoke enough about the Democratic Party and strategies and what Doge is doing. I think like a lot of people out there know that Doge is cutting something from some department and people are being laid off and their social security might be impacted. And Sanjay, if you want to talk to people here and tell them, what is Elon Musk? What is this unelected bureaucrat billionaire doing with this 20-year-old from Berkeley? Screw UC Berkeley. That's just my own personal opinion. What are
Yeah,
they
I'm
doing
there with you,
with,
bro. Screw
yeah,
Superman.
what are they doing with our social security? They have all out of information, and how is this going to impact every single day people?
So, kind of how I put it is the richest man in the world is gutting agencies that are supposed to oversee him. For example, USAID. Why do you go after that? Because USAID has been investigating Starlink in Russia, where he's kind of giving Russia access to Wi-Fi because it helps him make more money. Why is he wanting to got the CFPB? Because now that he's trying to transition Twitter into a more like banking centric
The
entity that's not just a
consumer,
social media
just
platform.
to break the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau, just to break it down for people. Yeah,
But of course, yeah, thank you.
yeah,
The reason why he's doing that is because they would oversee Twitter, assuming he made this shift. So I think that's the most important thing to know, that he's gutting agencies that limit his wealth. And I think what I think he's doing is simple. One, I think a lot of him and his unelected cronies of these people of our age running around, I think they're taking our data and running it through his AI algorithm so he can stay, ahead of the race. And I think
uh,
his end goal comes down to taking our our taxpayer dollars, our national
yeah,
system, our government as a whole, and using it to accomplish two things: one, to become the world's first trillionaire, and two, to put a man on Mars. And listen, I
yeah,
think space travel is a great idea.
pretty
I'm all
cool.
for it.
But I want to
Yeah, no,
get
it's
people
pretty cool. I'm
healthcare
all for
first,
it.
right?
But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, the most important thing is delivering for Americans on the ground.
Yeah,
And I would way rather prefer that we give social security to our elders, unlike Musk, who thinks it's a Ponzi scheme, than funnel all of our money into building more cyber trucks or into SpaceX so that Elon Musk can accomplish his questionable
or what happened
ambitions.
last night, right? I mean, the just boom, and I think what you bring up a perfect point, right? Because he just called it a Ponzi scheme, and I want Trump supporters, if you guys are watching this out here, Donald Trump ran on protecting Social Security. I think he's bullshitting. I think that eventually they're gonna try to cut it, but that's what he ran on, and Elon Musk called it a Ponzi scheme. So I think it's important to understand that even if you're on the right and you support these social programs, we can disagree about whatever policies, but we can agree that Elon Musk is not the guy to make decisions over whether your grandma receives her check this month to live. Right? Elon Musk is not the guy to make sure or to actually take away from funding that schools receive for disability programs, for example, free school lunch programs, right? He's not the guy to be doing this. And we can talk about, hey, we want to cut waste. I'm all for it. You want to cut waste and a lot of subsidies that we're sending to oil companies that do not need it, right? Or tax cuts that were given to these rich corporations. Why do they need more money? And the right likes to talk about, well, we're spending money in this country or that country abroad. Look, we can have that conversation at the end of the day. If we can all come together and just agree that Americans need fundamental things like healthcare, they need a shot to the middle class. They need to be able to access a good education. And that means having a government that may be more simple, more narrow focused, but actually delivers for the American people. And an unelected billionaire like Elon Musk just doesn't have your best interests in mind.
Yeah, it's also important to not minimize that it's not just Elon Musk. I don't know why political discourse just forgot about Project 2025 when the Trump administration has almost to a T been following certain parts of it. It's a little scary, but we'll just wait for the Comstock Act to get put into place or something like that. But I do agree with Belay, but it's important to address that. And I wonder if this is like the right question to be asking, but maybe there's too much focus on Elon Musk, um, because my reasoning is like he's not the person who's going to run for president at some point. Well, maybe he will. I don't know. That I guess that is a possibility, which would be a little scary. But he's not the traditional politician. He's relatively unpopular. I feel like it's also important to focus on the elected officials and the career politicians and staffers who are making this happen, like the people in Trump's administration. You need to at least spend some time talking about them and people selling their souls. Like Marco Rubio during that press conference with Zelensky looked like he was like his soul just left his body. He was trying to not like blurt out all the false things that Trump and JD Vance were saying. As somebody who was super pro Ukraine, that was antithetical to everything he wanted. You should be calling that out too. Yes, I agree with Marco Rubio that Ukraine should have more funding, that we should like fight against Putin. But he's also selling his soul and selling his policy positions just to have more power. Like, how is that not the definition of corruption? He's just
Yeah.
going after power in order to, you know. Anyways, there's my rant for the day.
Yeah, I
But
think you're completely right. I mean, I think this administration has kind of created this narrative that you have to obey the king. Obey whatever the king says. Whether you're someone in his cabinet, whether you're someone in Congress, you have to obey the king. And I think that, and I know there's kind of been this narrative that, Democrats have kind of cried wolf about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy. He is. And the issue is that we need to act like it. Instead of kind of using it as a political talking point, we need to act like it and treat him as such. During the joint address, Representative Al Green shouldn't have been the only person who was actively protesting. Many people in that chamber should have joined him. And we need more than just pink suits, and we need more than just signs being held up. One idea that I really like that I saw floated around was every single person should come in there and kind of like bring up a sign that says, "This is how many people who are on Medicaid benefits in my county.
I love that.
These are the people that you're putting."
Love
And I
that.
think that like that, and also being comfortable with making good trouble. As Democrats, we love to kind of use that quote, but now's the time to do it. And we shouldn't be censoring someone for standing up for working Americans. We should be praising them. And that's why
right.
today, Call Us Democrats of America, we released a statement kind of standing with Representative Al Green and the Democrats that backed him rather than voting to censor him.
The headline after the joint address to Congress should not have been whatever Trump talked about, his falsities and his random campaign talking points. It should have been Trump and Republican Party kicked out half of Congress because they didn't like what they were saying. It should have been, we are standing up to this. It should not have been, we are walking out quietly. Please file in line. And I think looking at Democratic leadership and seeing Hakeem Jeffries say, we need to play smart. We need to not bash too many. We need to not be a bull in a china shop. But that is what the Republican Party is doing while they're in power. Were you shaking your head?
I think,
do you
look,
disagree?
guys, at the end of the day, like, Congress people are going to do what they need to do for their districts, right? And some of the people that censor them, I disagree with it, but they're voting for their district. And like also understanding that is like not every congressperson is going to be this like progressive, like no. And I want there to be like a diverse cohort of Congress people out there. So I think that as much as we want them to vote a certain way or another way, they're going to do, I hope what they're going to do is what's best for their district. And when it comes to saving Medicaid and Social Security and Medicare, I hope that they'll be standing there with Al Green and voting against the House Republican budget, which we can talk about real briefly about how they want to strip funding away from life-saving programs. So I think at the end of the day, Congress people are going to vote for their district. So it's a little tough. It's tough here.
Sure, I acknowledge that, but I also just feel like
That's where the moderate of me comes out a little bit.
Yeah, I see that, Belay, and I'm gonna get the progressive out of me right now, the progressive, if you wanna say that. But I do feel like for the more moderate Congress people, for the more moderate Democrats, they are still incredibly antithetical to what Donald Trump wants and is, and you can't just roll over and say Donald Trump. Kind of what Sunjay was saying, like you can't let Donald Trump make himself king if he's going to do that. This is the most impactful administration possibly in our lifetimes, just because Donald Trump is breaking democratic norms. And I understand that there are political realities, and I don't expect every single Democrat to get kicked out of this joint address to Congress, but it's also not enough to sit there with signs saying fire Elon Musk. It's like you're not like getting your base energized by that. Everyone agrees with you on the left, and on the right, everyone disagrees with you. You're
everyone's just gonna say that, oh, like look at these losers who have like little signs made in
Yeah, I do think there needs to be some more bashing the walls of what we're capable of doing. Would be, and maybe moderates need to sit that out, and maybe they need to.
I think there's a place there's a place for like the Blue Dogs, for example. The Blue Dogs today is a lot better than the Blue Dogs back in the day, where actually the Blue Dogs are out there talking about Medicaid and Social Security and Medicare, and so I think like what Sunjay said, focusing on these economic issues, life-saving issues, is the way forward. And I like the idea of them coming with like signs saying X amount of people in my district. And I wish some, there's Democrats who won in Trump districts who came with signs saying, we won in the same district, blah, blah. Like, this is how many people, our voters, would lose healthcare coverage under your budget plan.
Yeah, and I think I would challenge the, like, I get the assumption of, like, they should vote in the way that is favorable to their districts, but I question if that is politically expedient. Like, for example, someone like Ami Bera, who voted in favor of it, he's, like, from SAC, a relatively safe blue district. I don't really see much of a reason for him. So I think I would argue.
Is it a moral thing then? Is it like a moral obligation? They feel like we have to like, oh, there shouldn't be any disruption to the president. We need to be civil, and you're always going to have people like that.
And I can understand where that's coming from. And if we're dealing with more precedented times, I would be like, yeah, that's very valid. But we're dealing with an administration that has no regard for our best interests, no regard for how our governing system is structured. And, obviously the United States Congress, we're the highest legislative body in the world. There's got to be some level of cordialness, but I think there's also a level of standing with your own and standing with, the member of your party who comes from, like Texas, not the most safe place in the world, and is actively is putting his own kind of political capital at risk to stand for what he believes in. So I think that's kind of where I stand, where I do understand that, like, yes, people have to make decisions for their own district, but I also think that that the decision that they made is not politically expedient.
I don't think someone's going to vote for them or vote against them because of the vote. Hope that.
Yeah, and I also think, along with standing with your party and standing with your people that you're aligned with, it's also this was a big thing in 2008, 2009, when Obama was trying to get the Affordable Care Act passed, is that a lot of people who voted for that bill did end up eventually losing in the midterms because it was not a popular thing. But sometimes there is a political capital calculus of maybe this is not the right place to do it. That is a conversation to have. Where do you stand up where it would be the most impactful? And we also want to minimize you not losing your seat in the next election. But it is a conversation of there is going to be some political sacrifice that we have to make in order to grow the movement. Or when we hopefully do get in power again, if Trump doesn't blow up the planet and we're all set on fire or something, then it needs to be a political calculus of what can we get past, what can we overturn for Trump, and maybe you will lose some people along the way in Congress. But yeah, again, me ranting. Yeah.
Sunjay, you got to go soon, or what's? Don't want to keep you on for too long. It's you have a busy day today, but I just wanted to touch on real quick something that's been happening is cuts that they're projecting to Medicaid. I know that they started the budget process, and to a lot of our viewers who may not understand that, basically there's a thing called reconciliation. It allows them pretty simply to just get 50 plus 1 or the 50 plus the vice presidential vote in the Senate for a bill to pass if it deals with budget concerns. And so the Republicans started that. And one of the things in the budget resolution is that they're calling for $880 billion, I believe, in cuts to Medicaid. It could also be Medicare. It's not specifically in there, but it could be cuts to, a disabled child's healthcare or a grandma's healthcare. And that's something that they're working on right now. And how can young people kind of stop this? How can people from all ages and all races and whatever identity you are kind of try to obstruct and stop this? Is going to town halls important? Where can people find these resources?
Of course. So I think One thing that Ken Martin told me to spread far and wide is if you text a
Yeah.
volunteer to 43367, when you text volunteer to that number, you'll be given updates kind of perpetually of what special elections are up and kind of how you can get involved to kind of shift away this slim majority that Trump has.
Yeah.
So that's the first way. Second way, I think, just comes down to exercising your rights as someone in democracy. Write to your elected officials. Join a protest. Join a letter writing campaign. Join your local college Democrats chapter who already kind of have the established infrastructure to do this work. I think it's just constantly pushing and accepting that, hey, we might not win today with the offensive we're doing, but if by showing up and consistently pushing the overturn window, we'll be able to ensure that, even if the cuts occur this time around, we'll realize that this was a terrible decision. Republicans are going to suffer in the midterms, we're going to suffer beyond, and we'll take back the House. But also, when we have Democratic leadership, also challenge them to actually represent your best interests instead of just saying, I think there's this narrative that people are sick of that, when we elect Democrats, everything's going to be okay. And listen, I'm the president of the College Democrats of America, but we still need to push our party to kind of
and have transparency in the party.
Exactly. Yeah. And let me find that number.
Find that number. We're gonna put it up here, and we'll put all your information in you guys want to see what the College Democrats are doing today, what Sunjay is doing today. We're gonna put all of his information in the bio. We really do appreciate you kind of coming out here, and I know that you have a busy day. You told me, so thank you for making time for us.